Hello everyone, thank you for joining me for another TLDR video. I'm your host, Voodoo Pickles, and we are going to talk about Survivor today. Survivor was written by Chuck Palahniuk and published in 1999, and this is so good. I really enjoyed this book. To understand this book, you have to understand the cult that is in this book. So the cult is the Creedish cult, and it's labeled as a death cult because they believe in something called the deliverance. So when the deliverance happens, the people at the compound of the cult unalive themselves. Everyone unalives themselves, and they sent people outside of the cult to work and produce income for the cult. So they were trained, they work outside of the compound, and every week they write back to their main area. They do confessions, everything like that. And when those people outside start finding out that the deliverance happened, they also unalive themselves in their own particular way. But that's just like the whole thing that the mainstream media type knows. It's the popular thing of what everybody knows happened. And so when this happened, it was a very large cult. The government created the Survivor program. What this program does is it takes these members that were scattered throughout the country. It takes them, and some of them did not have documentation. So they were given documentation. They were assigned a caseworker. They were given psychological care, some mental health care, prescribed medication if it was needed, and given jobs, a place to live, like trying to incorporate into like normal life. And the survivors started to unalive themselves, and the caseworker says it comes in waves. And our main character, Tender, is one of those survivors. So the book starts off with Tender hijacking a plane and is going to crash it. He's going to just crash it, and there's nobody on it when he's planning to do this, and he's telling us his life story through the black box of the plane. And Tender, when he was brought into this program, he was placed into a very wealthy couple's home and is kind of like their butler. He does the cleaning, he does the cooking, he does all of the maintenance on the house, and he does not know what these people look like. He just hears them on a speaker box, and they have a super huge planner that packs his day of what he should be doing at all times. So that is kind of his life. The cult did teach him how to do a lot of this house and domestic work before he left. He was put through a whole school on this. What is really interesting is he does a lot of these little things sprinkled in the book, like ask me how to take out a blood stain out of a shirt, off of drywall, off of these things. But he does mostly that. And while he's doing that, part of his job is tending the garden. Except he cannot grow anything or take care of anything that's really living. So he goes to a local mausoleum to where he steals flowers. He has a whole backstory on his whole persona of people that he's just like, if I'm ever asked, this is what happens. But he steals flowers, and he puts fake flowers into the couple's backyard and puts fragrance on them, paints them, makes sure they look real, and then steals real flowers to put inside in the floral arrangements. And the couple, they don't ever know. They're just like, all right. So he does that. And then when he's not at work, a large thing he does is he answers a crisis hotline that is he's not supposed to do that. It was a misprint that was in a newspaper, and he just kind of ran with it. Printed off stickers with "Don't do harm to yourself. Call. Give life one more chance," with his phone number, and he just put them all over the place. So he gets a lot of crisis calls about people having a really hard time. They're trying to not unalive themselves, and depending on the tone of how they're talking, he's always like, do it or don't do it. During one of these calls, he hears this young man, and he talks to him for a bit, and he convinces him to do it. He hears the shot through the phone and is like, all right, and then just hangs up. This man was named Trevor. So while he's at the mausoleum, he looks at the obituaries to look for the people that he was talking to previously who unalived themselves, and he also hopes that he can see where they're at in the mausoleum. So when he's at the mausoleum to get some more flowers, he meets Fertility. Fertility is Trevor's brother. She meets him there. She thinks that's her brother's secret lover, and he's really interested in Fertility, but very socially awkward. Doesn't know how to talk to people, doesn't really know what to do, never actually tried. So he's a little like, I don't know what to do. That night, Fertility calls on this little crisis hotline, and he is super stoked. He's like, she's talking to me. But she makes him very uncomfortable on this phone call because she starts going into very sexual things, which make him very uncomfortable. And he's kind of like, I don't want to talk to you like this. So it goes on a pattern like this. He goes to work, and while he's at work, he's there doing the things he's supposed to do. Fertility calls him on the phone at night, and then he convinces her to go on a date or a meeting with him in person, except she doesn't know that the person that she's talking to on the phone is him, and she keeps calling him like ugly and weird, like the guy she met. But they go meet, and they start dancing. Her brother used to love to dance, and she ends up telling him that her brother used to see terrible things in his dreams. He used to see the future. He used to see when people would pass away. He used to see plane crashes and hijackings and bombings and this, and to the point where he was being monitored by the FBI, but he would continuously call people to try and warn them, but nobody would believe him. So she's not surprised that he unalived himself. And so she's telling him as well that she started having these dreams too. So she understands. And when he's at work, the caseworker meets up with him, his assigned caseworker. His assigned caseworker is having a hard time. There's been an increase in unalivings, and she's really worried that she's going to lose another one. She's lost a few already. And every time he meets with her, he asks her how many are left. This current time, where it was like hundreds of them at the beginning, it is now down to 6 nationwide. So he's like, okay, that's just it's a little disturbing, and she's kind of freaking out a little bit. And she tells him that she thinks that there is a person out there that is unaliving people, but making it look like they did themselves. And she's worried. She's asking him has anybody talked to him? Is anybody unfamiliar, anything, like interrogating him about any suspicious people? He's like, no. And he's really annoyed with her because she's just sitting there drinking and smoking while just talking with him, marking it off of her checklist that she talked to him. And he's like, why don't you just pick up a brush and help me? You've been doing this for years. Why don't you just help me clean up? She does, and she gets really excited that she's like, yeah, this is working. This is manageable. Like I said, she's having a hard time. And he leaves and goes to meet Fertility, and they go to a department store, and they go in there. A fire breaks out, and she dances with him, and they're saved. They're fine. She says she saw all of this in a dream. But while they were on their way there or on their way back, there was a man in the bus who is making Creedish jokes. And he goes through, there's a whole page and a half in the book about jokes that people make at Creedish expense that are just unaliving, about them unaliving themselves. She snaps at this man, and as the man gets off the thing, he sees that he's wearing the traditional Creedish clothing, and he looks at him and tenders that's my brother. That's Adam. and is his twin brother. Fertility questions him about this, but he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. And so in the Creedish cult, there are, well, the firstborn male of the family is named Adam, and then the family last name. Every son after that is named Tender, and every female born is named Biddy. And they're all married off. The Adams are married off to a Biddy, and then the Tenders are trained in this school of, based on where they place on some tests on what job would be best and most profitable for the cult as a whole. They are sent off to different areas to go do that job, and they're sent off. They're supposed to never come back. They're not supposed to get married. They're not supposed to have relationships with anybody outside of the church. Even if they meet somebody within the church, they're supposed to be like, oh, I have these lines to say, and that's it. And he sees his brother there. He ignores it. He goes back home, and then he gets a call on his phone. He thinks it's fertility, but it's actually his brother, Adam, saying those lines to him. And he pretty much to kind of threaten sometimes, talks him a little bit about the church, freaks him out, doesn't answer the phone for the rest of the night. Next day goes to work, where he finds his caseworker there he's been trying to get a hold of, and she's not been answering. She tells him he's the only Creedish alive, and that's why she's not at work today. And he's like, well, there's the unaliving person out there, the person who's been murdering people and all of this. He's out there, and he called me, and he's trying to get me. And she's like, don't worry, you're the last one. I don't really, she completely checks out at that point. Is just cleaning the house. And because he's the last one left, there's a whole media storm around this one couple's house. And they go take a vacation. They're not wanting to deal with it. They take a vacation. He's stuck there with this caseworker. He doesn't really know what to do. He starts drinking, and he goes in one day and finds her dead. She's gone. The police suspect him, but he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. It was, I forget what gas it was. It was chlorine? Not chlorine. A deadly gas that happens when you mix certain cleaning chemicals. I don't know if other people were told as well, don't mix the cleaning chemicals because you can make a poisonous, toxic gas and unalive yourself. That's what happened to her. So he's there. He gets a call from a guy in New York saying that I can be your agent. We can have all of these interviews lined up. We can have this whole marketing campaign thing. He doesn't know what to do. So he's just like, okay. And he goes. The agent books him a plane ticket, meets him at a limo, tells him he is too fat to be a messiah, so he has to lose weight. And he has to work out a lot. They do these cosmetic surgery on him. They use a lot of different type of drugs, illegal and legal, to make him into this outwardly perfect messiah that people can follow, that people can throw their money at, pray to, everything. So he's just in this drugged haze, just signing everything this guy puts in front of him, saying sign. The agent is just like, there is nothing new in this world. We have thought of everything. There's everything like this. The world is due for another messiah, or you're gonna do, and we're all gonna be stupid rich. It's pretty ridiculous with the whole agent's process. But he's in New York. He starts becoming super famous. He's the last Creedish member. He just spews all of the stories that they gave him about how horrible his childhood was, the abuse that he went through as in the cult, and all of this. And this goes on for a while. I'm not sure exactly how long. I think a year or two. And it just goes on. And towards the end of this, they're still telling him that he needs to get married because people are still questioning him healed from this cult, because he is not in any relationship. He doesn't have any kids. He's not married. And so his agent decides that they're going to go through this whole Genesis program, and a wife will be selected for him. And they will get married at the Super Bowl. And it'll be this huge thing. And then 9 months later, she will have a baby. And he has it all planned out. And he tells them, and he's like, okay, sign this, wait, sign this, sign this. And he's just signing all of this. So he has like prayer books out. He has toys out. He has his own church. He has radio stations where he just spews these sermons that other people wrote for him. And he's just going through this, and he's just like, okay. And he's just following what everybody is saying. And then they tell him that he needs a miracle. He needs to say a miracle will happen. And while he's kind of thinking, how am I going to do that? Look, I don't know how to do that. Fertility jumps back into his life because, oh yeah, I didn't tell you, Fertility had an evil job that she told him about previously that he just kind of did not want to talk to her anymore. And so Fertility comes back, but because she can see the future in her dreams, she tells him a miracle. He spews it back out to people. They're super excited, and they just continue to do this. She randomly meets him because she knows where he's going to be, what he's going to say, everything. She knows everything. And she tells him a miracle. He spews it back, and then on goes his empire. And during the Super Bowl, he needs a very big miracle. So she tells it to him. And at the Super Bowl, she tells him that the police are trying to arrest him for the caseworker. They want to arrest him for the other Creedish members' unalivings, and she tells him that his agent will be unalived after using the Tender Branson perfume. And so he's at the Super Bowl. He's ready to marry this woman who is not this woman. She's sick. So her understudy is there. And she's like, don't worry about it. I'm not going to mess up my lines, from that distance I'll have my veil on. Nobody will know. It's fine. And they go through this little marriage ceremony at the Super Bowl. And then before the police can get to him, because his agent drops dead, before the police can get to him, he says his miracle, which is the result of that Super Bowl game. And chaos erupts. Everybody's pissed off. People are happy. People are upset. People are like freaking out. Everybody storms the field. He is taken, not off of the stage, like he's almost arrested, but he jumps down and he just runs. And when he runs, he meets with Fertility and his brother Adam, and they go on the run together using mobile homes that are being hauled by semi-trailers or semi-trucks across country. So they jump in and out, and they just kind of travel that way. While they're doing this, Fertility at the very end, just like towards the end, she just kind of disappears. She's like, I'm done with this. You guys need to do this. But him and his brother start talking more. We find out that during the growing up in a cult process, he was brainwashed into not wanting to have relationships and not wanting to have sex, because when a new child was born into the cult, all of the biddies and all of the tenders were present there. They had to sit there and watch these women give birth to children. And every time somebody was born, and they associated that with sex. So that keeps them from having sex. And his brother Adam is like, all right, we need to break this. We need to break this cycle in you. You need to be free. Right now you're a slave. Right now you're still following these things, even though he's like, I do all of this. I'm not following the creed. And he's like, yeah, you kind of are. And they're driving towards the land that the cult had, which has been turned into a landfill for porn, sex toys, and all those type of materials that a law that his agent put through and was passed are. So that's just a huge landfill for that. When they get there, it's so full of smoke that they crash into a cement barrier, which causes a bobblehead action figure to get caught in his brother's eye, in Adam's eye. And when that happens, he's like, oh no, you have to kill me. And Tender's like, no, I'm going to get you a lawyer. I'm going to get you a doctor. Everything's going to be fine. And he's like, all right, well, disfigure me so nobody will want to know it's me or want me or anything. He's like, all right. Covers his face with a magazine, has his brother pick up a rock, and he's like, hit me in the face. I'll tell you when to stop so you don't kill me. Tender's like, promise? Adam's like, promise. So Tender does that, and after a while, he realizes that Adam is not talking to him. Adam's dead. He's face fully caved in. Fertility shows back up in a cab, and they start traveling around, not really talking. She calls a client because her evil job is she is a surrogate, except she's barren, so she cannot have children. But she's a surrogate who her clients are set up by a doctor, and so she charges the people for her services and per attempt, and nothing comes of it because she's barren, so they just give her money. And so that was the evil job that she told Tender about in the first place. So she calls a client to say like, hey, I'm available at this time. And so to get a place to stay, pretty much. Turns out it's the couple that Tender was originally hired by. And while she's doing her job, she tells Tender, or before she does her job, she tells Tender, like, you know, wait in the basement. Once they're asleep, come up to the room. And he's like, all right, cool. So Adam has been talking to Fertility the whole time they were writing those little trailers that she needs to have sex with his brother. That's the only way he's going to free his mind from this cult, is if he has sex. And since she is barren, everything is like the perfect thing. Like she just needs to, they just need to have sex. And they were arguing back and forth with it. Tender goes upstairs and he's like, well, is it going to happen? Should we do this? And Fertility is like, I guess. So they have sex. And the next day, Fertility is like trying to get on a plane to Sydney. She tells him that she has finally been surprised because she knows everything, because she sees everything in her dreams. She's finally been surprised. And the surprise is she's pregnant. So she is going to get on a plane to go to Sydney, and she's going to hijack it because it's supposed to be hijacked because that's fate. And she said, hopefully this will take care of itself in the aftermath of that. He chases after her. They both get to the area. He finds out that the gun that his brother had, she took away from him and put it into the urn of her brother to smuggle this onto a plane. And while they just got through security, there's FBI, there's police officers, somebody recognized him, so everybody's kind of swarming in. He takes her hostage and backs onto the plane, takes the plane hostage while asking who's going to hijack this plane, pointing a weapon at people, saying, one of you is going to hijack this plane. Which one of you is it? Oh, well, Fertility is just sitting there giggling. And she's like, this is so ironic. You don't even know. Finally, he realizes that he's the hijacker, that it's him this whole time. And he stops on their way to Australia. He has the pilot land at this airstrip and lets everybody out. Everybody has to leave except for one pilot. Gets up back on the plane. That one pilot puts it on autopilot, tells him how to know when the plane's gonna just go down. He's like, yeah, 4 engines. He's like, after a while, they're going to burn out. You're going to start with this 4, and these are these lights here, and you're going to go down to 1, and then it's just going to crash. And he's like, okay. The pilot gets on a parachute, jumps out. And then that's how we go back to the beginning of the book. Fertility did tell him that if he figured out a way to get off of the plane, that they would find each other and live happily ever after. Like they would make this work. Like she's like, I'd help you be better at sex. So he's like, that sounds awesome. But at the end of the book, he's like, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to make it, as he's crashing into somewhere in Australia. And he's like, I'm not going to make it. He's like, and so this is my story. This is how I live on. And that was Survivor. Like, this whole book threw me for a loop. You see all of that? You see all of that? Those are all things that I want to write down and remember. This book was so good. I gave this a 5 out of 5. It was just so good. I read another series from him and it was good, but this one hit. This one was just, it was everything I needed in a book when I needed it. And it was great. I highly encourage everyone to read it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope you guys have an amazing day, night, afternoon, whatever it is where you are. I will have out the review hopefully very soon. I'm going to do this out of order just because I cannot stop talking about this book, and I can't wait to tell you guys all the things I left out. So that will be in the description below. If you don't see it, that's because I haven't done it yet. I'm sorry, but keep those notifications on. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, all of those things, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.